There are some tag videos that require the participant to just list off some books that they are vaguely aware of or that fit a certain criteria that the person is asking. Then there are other tags which appeal mostly to me, which bring a discussion or enable the participant to further a conversation. And if you're looking for tags, I would definitely check out Gunpowder, Fiction and Plot. Fantastic in their own right, and when they do an original tag, it's one that you want to be looking out for. The previous tag they had constructed was the TBR tag, which went around like wildfire. Seeing this tag, the spoiler tag, pop up on my sub feed, I knew this was going to be an interesting one, and indeed it is. Generally, I have a lot of thoughts and issues when it comes to spoilers, and I'm hoping I can bring something different to the table on something that people wouldn't consider as a spoiler, but had an experience with me that maybe view them otherwise. Question 1, which I'm going to give 2 answers, is what do you consider a spoiler? So firstly, I think generally it would be something that would impede or negate the reading of a certain story or an experience through any medium. This works with books, films, TV shows, you name it, you can spoil it. Personally, you could tell me a book that I'm going to read or halfway through it. You could tell me blow by blow, provide me an entire detailed plot summary of what's about to happen. I've never felt as though my experience has been impeded or negated, or that I've lost something in that case. I'm more interested in how the author is able to build that tension, how they're able to build the emotion, the language, how they are describing it. That to me is more important than the actual this is what happened. In some cases, I go out of my way to be spoiled. I watch reviews of books that I haven't read or books that I'm possibly going to read in the next month or so. So even though I'll have all that information given to me, am I ever going to remember it? Possibly, maybe, but as of now, it's never made an impact. Before talking about my second part, let's go back again. Wait, so you go out of your way to be spoiled? Some books are so dense, are so old, are so archaic that in order to obtain the information takes a lot of work. And if I'm struggling my way through a book and finish it to go and look for what happened, it makes no difference to me when I understood that information, be it after or before, but I would like to know beforehand so I can understand where I am within the plot, where I am in the author's mind. It gives you a roadmap. A path, a guide, or helping hand from the base to a summit of a mountain won't negate your views from the top. Yes, you know that you're going to get there. And yes, I did just hit my elbow on a radiator, but it's not going to completely negate the experience. It's the views, it's the imagery, it's the scenery that makes that journey memorable. That's what the author's writing skills has to do. That's what ensures you're reading a good book from a bad book. My second answer to this question, what do you think a spoiler is, comes from the fact that I review books. And unlike wrap-ups, I do in-depth reviews. So I am solely talking about one book. And I have to talk about that book in a way that is engaging, which is insightful, and wants to make you pick it up. And I get a lot of questions of, well, I think this is a spoiler, or before I watch this, are there any spoilers? A spoiler then becomes a 4D game of chess where I, someone who has engaged in the content, is trying to second guess someone who has not engaged in the content, is going to look upon my experience of the content to assume that my understanding will ruin their experience of it. And that's as complex as it gets. Is me reviewing the structures, the themes, the characters, the relationships, the context, a spoiler? Well, to some people, yes, that will be. But when it comes to reviewing, I feel as though you have to go into some knowledge of the book to understand if you're going to pick it up. Hey, it would be absolutely wonderful if I could go in blind with every single book that I bought. But in order to challenge yourself, in order to find other cultures to read, in order to diversify your reading, and more so than diversify, to become more inclusive in your reading, or to do a deep dive into an author's work, you're gonna have to be spoiled in some way, shape, or form. You cannot research new authors, new books, books that have been previously shrouded, countries that are now having a resurgence in their literature. You need to be spoiled in some way, shape, or form. It's no good someone being like, hey, this is a unheard book that's been translated called The Three Little Pigs. 5 stars, it was great. If that's all you're basing your reading off, you have no idea what you are getting involved in, especially as you diversify. I think being spoiled is part of it. If you're so far removed for a topic, or you have zero knowledge and understanding, most of what the author is going to write will go over your head. I've been in those circumstances. Doing the research after the book, for me, I find that ineffective and inefficient. Pivotal moments in books, especially in literary fiction where I do all my reading, are meant to be impactful. You will lose all impact if you have zero understanding to why that is happening. The next question might already unpick what I've just said, which is, does the genre you're reading impact what you consider to be a spoiler? Know that when I talk about books, I read literary fiction, so that's all I'm really concerned about. When it comes to a murder mystery novel, then yes, if you just go up to someone and be like, hey, it was the father with the axe in the next room who did it, you've negated the book. That's why Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap, they tell you after you've watched the stage production, don't tell anyone. Because the joy, the experience, the entertainment is in who did it. If you know who the who is, some of that entertainment is lost. It's not to say that all whodunits are that way inclined. I think if you were to spoil Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, or Bordellino of the who did the crime, but then you're dealing with a very different beast to, say, a Harlan Coben. I don't read any other genres, so I'd say it's all fair game. If you're reading a book and someone wants to talk to you about it and drops a piece of information that you haven't got to yet in a book, I think just expect it. Is it really going to impact the entire thing? Like, if I think about it, maybe romance, I don't think you can spoil, because if the storyline is based on will they, won't they get together, it's one of two options. It's been spoiled by the first page. Question 3. All the best bits are in the trailer. Sometimes a synopsis can be too detailed. Do you research books prior to reading them, or do you go in blind? I've pretty much covered this in question 1. I really should have read the other questions before I started, but hey, I never plan anything. Semi-short answer, yes. When it comes to classics and modern classics, I will try to get some information. It might not be about that specific book, but I'll want to understand what the author is talking about. Even if it means just going on to a Wikipedia summary or reading a few reviews of their other books, or if it's talking about a particular period in time. So say for Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, I didn't know anything about the emergency years. I had to do my research on that. For Solzhenitsyn, I don't know anything about the Gulag, so I read up roughly about what the Gulag was and its impact. When it comes to books, it's okay to say, hey, I don't know what this is talking about. You have to go out of your way. If it comes to debut authors and new releases and there's not much out there in the ether, I will have to go in blind. But sure enough, I will go and find interviews as soon as that book has had time to breathe, as soon as it's had a reception. But going in blind generally for me, I will end up researching something. To give you an example, at the moment, me and Charlotte from KDBooks are doing a read-along of Les Mis. I'll link all the details down below. And I know nothing about Les Mis. I've not seen the stage production. I've not seen the film. In the Discord that we're running, all I am doing is asking questions. Why on earth is there an elephant? Or why isn't this the French Revolution that I thought it was going to be? Why is there another French Revolution I don't know about? And all those questions feed into, I wish I had done some form of research beforehand that, yes, would probably spoil some of it to me, but will give me an insight to what's even going on. Question 4. Sometimes the introduction or translator's note can spoil the ending, especially for classics. Has this ever happened to you? I will read those like twice before I even like break the spine into something. Again, with the exception of Les Mis at the moment, anything that has an introduction, I will read. I don't think I've ever been spoiled by an introduction. The only one that like really springs to mind is Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle of the Oxford Modern Classics, and being so utterly confused of what was even going on that I might not have bothered reading it because I couldn't have even told you what the story was going to be from reading that. And then I read Cat's Cradle and equally, I mean, he was successful, wasn't he, as an author? It wasn't as bad as Breakfast of Champions, because that is a hot mess of a book, though. Question 5. Name a time somebody spoiled a novel for you. Sorry about that, father duties. Name a time someone spoiled a novel for you. Now, this is something I want to bring to the table, and I do hope, like the TBR tag, Scott and Elle do a reaction and mention this thing, because I'm curious to what they think, and I would be curious to your thoughts. I was bought A Little Life when it came out by my darling wife, and reading the synopsis and getting about 80 pages in, I decided that a book about 4 people who were moving in New York and their careers was not for me, and I put it down. I went through my annual unhaul and I sent that book out of my life because I thought I'm not really interested in it. A few years go by from 2015 and I started watching people reviewing books on YouTube, and it became my primary consumption. And someone reviewed A Little Life and mentioned straight away at the beginning the trigger warnings of child abuse, self-harm and suicide. And I remember this clear as day. I was sat on the train station commuting to work into Cardiff thinking, wait, this isn't the book that I was going to read, surely. And lo and behold, it was. And I started watching multiple reviews, and the trigger warnings kept coming up, and it took me until I think it was 2019 I finally picked it back up, started it again. But in me I was like, well, I'm expecting something now. And I'm not going to say that knowing that information took anything away from the book. I absolutely adore that book and think in regards to male mental health and self-harm, it does a very accurate portrayal from my own experience. But knowing that there was suicide in it, it didn't take me too long after the first incident of self-harming to know who was going to kill themselves. Now, let me say this, I am not saying trigger warnings are not useful, are not beneficial, or are not important. I'm not saying that at all. But they are a spoiler. Because if someone had said in a review, this person kills themselves, everyone would be saying, oh, you've given a big spoiler here. I've never seen that when it comes to a trigger warning where they say suicide happens in this book. And I've noticed it when it comes to when I watch TV or when I watch films. On Netflix it says what's going to happen up above. And if I don't know what the film is, as soon as it says suicide, well, I kind of know what's going to happen. I kind of know like what the pivotal point is there. Or if it says sexual assault or sexual harassment. There's something in me that knows that's going to happen. I'd like to know people's thoughts on that. Question 6, have I ever spoiled a novel for someone else? Again, we're going into 4D chess territory, so I'm going to say yes, probably all the time, but for one clear example where I stated a review, I'm just going to have to tell you what happens because I can't talk about the book without talking about what happens, would be my Disgrace review by J.M. Coetzee. I'd pretty much just tell you what happens because there's no other way to talk about that book without talking about what happens. I think maybe that's something worthwhile to mention, is that some books need you to spoil them where other books you can get away with not giving as much information. Now that's not to say that all those books are plot driven. Some character driven and thematic driven novels are difficult to get a grasp on them without spoiling something. If spoilers ruin novels, are there some authors or genres you can't reread? I've only had to reread books for like an academic purpose, but upon rereading, I'm looking for something very different other to the plot. Maybe films to some degree, but there's only like a handful of films I would rewatch on a basis, but they're bringing me something more than the plot itself. It's bringing me back a memory, it's bringing me back like a theme I like discussed, a certain cinematic style, or predominantly like nostalgia. If you look at Christmas films, I'm not watching certain Christmas films for the plot, for the story. I'm watching them because they're nostalgic. Question 8, and probably what I've been ranting about this entire time. When reviewing, are you spoiler free? Does this limit your ability to discuss? Let's focus on the latter part. Does it limit my ability? It depends on the book. If I'm going to review something that a lot of people are reading, such as the Booker Prize books, I'll talk about what happens, because the consensus I'm thinking is that you're watching the review because you've read it, or you've heard something about it that's made you go, okay, what is this really about? You're looking for more information at that stage. When it comes to my more obscure choices or books that aren't read by a lot of people, I tend to err on the side of talking about themes or discussion points, because I want you to be intrigued enough to read the book. Ironically, they are the ones with the lowest views because obviously not many people read them, and I understand that. When I review, I don't script, so it's very much a turn on the camera, I sit down, and here we go. And why I enjoy that unscripted, that rawness of the review, is that I'm talking about things that I'm genuinely interested, which are context, themes, and relationships. Those three things don't rely on a plot as such. I might have to tell you why some plot points do happen that change or alter or obscure those certain things, but generally me just telling you the plot summary, that's not a review, that's a plot summary. Go back to the prior part of the question, when reviewing, are you spoiler free? 4D chess starts playing in my head. I can't promise that I'm going to be spoiler free, but I want to give you enough intrigue for you to go and pick the book up, even if that's a negative review or a positive review, because if I don't like something that you like, you'll probably like the book I'm not so happy about, and vice versa. If I'm really happy about a book and you don't like that thing, then probably stay away from it. I'll give you enough insight to make that decision. Finally, it's tag some people, and I'm just going to leave the channels down below because they say 5, but I'm going to do a lot more than that. Please check the names down below, and if you're unaware of those names, click through to their channels. I ensure that I watch only the creme de la creme of booktube reviewers. I'll see you with the next one, and Scott, Nell, you've done her again, eh? al dente 10 out of 10 tag